Welcome back, everybody, to Talk of the Now podcast. I am your host, Gene, with Jason. Jason, how are you today? Doing?
I am doing well, sir.
Really? That's good. So, Jason, I thought about something that we could go over.
As opposed to
Oh,
money.
by
Yeah.
the way, I'm changing subjects here. Um, I went back this past weekend and watched something that I hadn't watched in probably, good grief. Well, I watched Back to the Future, and I
Yeah.
haven't. I'd watched that in like 5 years, but I hadn't watched part two and three, and I went back this weekend and watched the entire trilogy again, and I gotta say, believe it or not, they all. I mean, obviously the first one's the best one, but they all three held up pretty well. They held up pretty
Yeah.
well, especially
Okay.
the third one. The second one is kind of a darker movie, and you know,
Kind of has to be though. Yeah.
yeah, and it's kind of a bummer type movie, but it does have a lot of cool things in it. And the third one is it's just a whole it's just basically it's a western essentially. And
Right.
it's kind of a cool western. So um I was impressed by how much I liked it.
Yeah. Zemeckis' work tends to hold up. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's funny though that even the quirky things of the 80s and styles and culture of that
Yeah.
time, you would think that it would come across as hokey and corny, which it did at times, but it still held up. Like you're the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, this is an original story written by people that had an original idea, and they came up with this, and I didn't even notice younger. Yeah, now that I'm older watching it, that Doc Brown has this fascination with Jules Verne,
Yep.
um, and he names his kids after that in the third
Yep.
one. Spoiler alert, but nowadays, I mean, they'd probably try to turn this franchise into like 10 different movies, but
Yeah. Thank goodness I
yeah,
wouldn't
it's
have.
just fascinating to watch it and just sort of like the whole concept of how they did. Now, I will say this though, the Biff character does become quite annoying after a while. It's sort of like you can't. I mean, I know his character's supposed to be annoying, but
It does a
so
good job of achieving that. Yes.
yeah, there are many times you're like, can we just get rid of Biff and just have something else go on? But otherwise, though, you know, Michael J. Fox is one of the best characters in the third one is Michael J. Fox playing um, his ancestor, an Irish guy. That's one of
Yeah.
the best characters in the movie, where he plays an Irish guy that basically gives Michael J. Fox's character wisdom.
Right.
So go back and watch it, Jason. I think you shall concur if you haven't in a while.
Yeah. I've got the trilogy on Blu-ray. I need to watch it. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good. Then you watch that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
As
Jason, I haven't
I'm
gone. So what?
as I'm setting up my semi-home theater here. I've been running some test movies. Obviously, I ran American Graffiti, my favorite movie of all time. Spoiler alert, in case you haven't watched that episode of our podcast. Um, but then I watched the Woodstock Festival documentary on there. I watched a couple other movies, but yeah, it's interesting when you go back and watch something
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
it's been a long time since I sat down and watched that Woodstock's 3 days of peace, love, and music or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and it was produced really well.
It really was. What fascinates me about that, and I watched, if you check out Tournament of Classic Movies, they have a director's cut out there that they broadcast sometimes. And the music's mainly what I like about it. I mean, some of the music in it is quite amazing
Yeah,
for the time. Like, I mean, some of the artists that played at that,
yeah.
like the Who during that was amazing sound. Um, yeah, some of the bands and the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Yeah,
By the time they got to Woodstock, yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely an eye opener of '60s hippie culture. That's for sure. It's definitely not G rated. We'll just say that.
no,
Um,
no,
um,
not at all.
you see some stuff, you're like, "Ooh, grandma, jeez." Because now these people are old. If you think about it. Yeah, it harkens back to old school days of when they would edit things and cut them and actually physically put the prints next to each other and then fill them into another print. And that's how they did the split screen. I mean, it was very
Yeah.
analog kind of way of doing things, but it was well done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm weird. I like to just pop a movie in. That's kind of how I test my setup of my systems and stuff. When it comes to home theaters. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to go back and watch stuff you haven't watched in a while, and yeah, I'm definitely a fan of doing that. Kind of
Yep.
revisiting your cinematic collection, I guess.
Well, Jason, this episode we're doing here is we're kind of going all over the map here. Do you want to go? Let me give you a choice of direction here. So we'll take this for the next 20 minutes.
Yes.
Do you want to go the 80s music route, or do you want to carry on with movie discussion?
You know what? Let's go the '80s musical route. Let's do it.
Really?
I'll take the road less traveled, Gene.
Well, here's what I want to talk about. I was looking over our podcast that we've done, and I think that we've hit 80s music before.
Right.
I was looking at it, and I don't think that I'm trying to see if we had. Now, obviously, we've covered 80s movies, but I don't think that we've really covered. Like, I have a music of the 90s discussion, and I was trying to see if I had a music of the 80s discussion, which I think we've covered a little bit. But I don't think that we specifically talked about. Well, let me ask you this: what are you listening to 80s music still in your own life at all, or do you just randomly listen to it as it comes up?
Mostly randomly listen to it, but it does come up a lot.
You're a Spotify guy, right?
Yeah, I like that app with the green logo. Yes.
So do you just like put it on 80s music and let it run?
I get I get the weekly the mixes that they make for me as well, which are nice. Mm-hmm. They come out based on what you listen to, that kind of thing. I've got all my podcasts, which are kind of all over the page mostly. I think my skate night mix is a lot of 80s, it's a lot of 70s and 80s. But so that's kind of where I camp out on the 80s stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's obviously, I think in our lives, it's going to come up a lot more in our music library in general than a lot of people.
Well, okay, yeah, I agree. What I have found myself listening to a lot of 80s music lately.
Yeah.
If you if you had, came down and sat next to me when I was 15 years old or sometime in the 90s or whatever, tried to figure out what I was listening to. I mean, I go through waves of, I think a lot of people do, of what you're listening to different times. Like, I would say from about the age of 15 to 20, it was nothing to find Led Zeppelin or early 90s rock in my car. Stuff
right.
like Led Zeppelin, Journey, Collective Soul, some contemporary Christian music, and I was trying to think of what else I listened to. The Allman Brothers. That was kind of like, Leonard Skinner, maybe a little bit of The Who, things like that. That was kind of what was in my playlist, if you will, most of the 90s. And I started liking U2 later on. As a matter of fact, even back in the 80s, I liked U2, but I didn't really love listening to them until the late 90s.
Right.
But the reason I'm saying that is that as I've gotten older, what I have really gotten into lately is new wave music.
Yeah. Like
I've been finding myself listening to it a lot lately. And I know that's kind of a broad category of new wave music. Like sometimes somebody will tell me something's a new wave song, and I'm like, really? Or I'll hear it and kind of a well, for instance, there's a local show here on 99X radio station called the Retroplex of Pleasure, I think is what he calls it.
Steve's House of Retro Pleasure, yes.
Yeah, Steve's House Retroplex. Used to be called the Retroplex too at one point.
That would be Steve Craig, by the way.
Yeah, Steve Craig.
Talk about an awesome podcast guest if you could ever get him on.
Yeah, I have messaged him and he didn't respond to that, but I know he's probably busy.
He's busy.
Anyway, basically, it's a new wave. It's an hour of new wave every day at lunchtime at 12. You can find that, by the way, online if you want to hunt it down. They broadcast their music.
All the apps too. Yeah, all the apps have 99X on there.
But anyway, for instance, today he played Dire Straits, and I was like, wow, I never really thought about that as a new wave song, but I guess it could be.
He kind of strays a little bit from it. Depending upon if somebody has a birthday or if there's a history, this date in history, that part.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll kind of stray a little bit, but it all kind of has that vein of 80s, early 90s new wave. So I wouldn't have thought of Dire Straits either, but yeah.
Well, okay. So what I want to do for you then, I'm just going to run through. I have what I call an 80s new wave greatest hits, if you will, on my iTunes. I don't even know if iTunes is a thing anymore, but I do have it. That I put in here, and so I just thought I'd let you in on some of that. What I have in here, and these, I don't know if I'd say these are all my favorite '80s songs, but these are a lot of.
It's too bad you can't play them.
Oh yeah, play samples. That would be nice. And I have an '80s playlist, and that has 323 songs on it.
Yeah.
But this playlist, it has great songs that I love. Don't get me wrong. Like it has Bruce Springsteen in it. It has Boston Amanda. It has Hall & Oates, which I guess that could be argued whether or not they're new wave.
Yeah, Boston's not. Definitely not.
No, definitely not. And REO Speedwagon.
Yeah, I know.
And then I have my new wave best hits, and here's a lot of them. I have get a drink of water. Anyway, so okay, I have Naked Eyes, Promises.
Okay.
Got a lot of Fix, Saved by Zero, After the Fire, De Commissar. Tears for Fears got a lot of those songs on it. Head Over Heels, Broken, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Big Country, In a Big Country, When in Rome, The Promise.
Yep. Thanks.
In Excess, a lot of In Excess on it. Huh?
Oh yeah. This is nothing but earworms in my head now. Thank you. But yeah, In Excess definitely. Yeah.
This is not one. See, a lot of this list are things that are sort of like my all-time favorite songs that I can remember even from childhood. Right. And I know that Yes is not a new wave band, but I have Owner of a Lonely Heart on there because it's just such a quintessential 80s song to me.
Yes is not a new wave band, but they are progressive rock.
Yeah, which is sort of related in a way.
Yeah, it's prog rock, definitely. Yeah.
Boomtown Rats, Don't Like Mondays. Excuse me. Of course, U2, New Year's Day. And then I put just about anything that you could think of, especially a lot of the one-hit wonders like the Bugles, Video Killed the Radio Star, The Flock of Seagulls. Yeah. Huh?
The Buggles, yes.
Oh, Buggles. That's what I said. Excuse me. Of course, I was a big fan of the Cars even back in the 80s.
Oh yeah, they were great.
And later on, when I got their greatest hits, liked them even more because I found other songs that I had not heard before. Crowded House, Don't Dream It's Over. The Vapors, Turning Japanese. Pretty in Pink by the Psychedelic Furs.
They're not a one-hit wonder, but
no, they're not. Another band I got their greatest hits, and I was like, wow, they did all this stuff.
Ghost in You is my favorite song from them. Ghost in You. I love that song.
Really interesting. Yeah. Love My Way might be my favorite. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. I have all these on vinyl, so yeah.
What else? A band that was played too much, and Jason can affirm this, from the 80s was Depeche Mode, but they had some cool songs back then.
Yeah,
MTV flat out wore their music out.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm not a huge Depeche Mode fan. It gets in my head, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna like. They're not a go-to band for me.
I just can't get enough.
I've got enough. I'm done.
Dexy's, of course, Dexy's Midnight Rider.
Midnight Runners, yes. Yeah.
Runners, that's what I said. Of course, Duran Duran. Which again, MTV. I don't know if they were like in a partnership.
Rio. Yeah. Well, here's the other thing you got to remember about MTV, especially early MTV. There were not many American videos, but there were European and British videos, and that's why you heard a lot of that.
Yeah,
they were ahead of us on making videos, so that's why everything was British.
Well, not to mention too that those new wave bands back then, which I didn't even know I was being influenced by because I sat there as a little kid watching it.
Yeah.
They had they were like, oh, here MTV, will you play my video for me? And they played them because they didn't have anything else. They had to play something, and so
That's what I said. Yeah, there was nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just I don't know if a lot of these bands would have been discovered had it not been because they might not have gotten radio play. Had it not been for MTV, they had the music video to send to MTV, but they didn't necessarily get the radio time.
Think about Madness, that band Madness, Our House.
Yeah.
I mean,
great
come on.
band.
Now, we would have never heard of them had it not been for MTV and that video.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. Adam and the Ants.
Yep. Going on here, the Fix, one thing leads to another.
Right.
Again, this is a band that sort of transcended new wave, I guess, but the Talking Heads, they were sort of, I guess, what would you call them? Maybe a semi-prog rock / kind of new wave.
Yeah, I mean,
sort of post-prog rock, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know what to really categorize them as. They do kind of span a few different categories, but yeah.
Sometimes they sound like straight up classic rock, and other times they sound like the most progressive new wave band.
Sometimes it can sound like an island, almost reggae-ish kind of sound. You're like, what? No, yeah.
Yeah.
Stop making sense, dude. Just keep going. All
right. Gary Newman, Cars.
Yep.
I put Pat Benatar in here because I love Love Is a Battlefield.
Yeah, that might just be considered pop or kind of rock more than.
Oh yeah.
Some of her stuff, but I mean, it could easily be like.
And another band that I really liked a lot was the Pretenders of the '80s. They were surprisingly good straight up rock band of the early '80s.
Yeah.
Thompson Twins.
Hold me now.
Yeah. Simple Minds. Don't you forget about me.
Yep.
You mentioned Madness. Men at Work is sort of a.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, Men at Work. I think if they had came out in the '70s, they would have been just as popular because.
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah.
They're
well done.
Pretty timeless music.
Well produced music too. Yeah.
I mean, I almost don't want to put them in a '80s category just because their music was, so good. Colin, his music abilities and singing abilities.
Yeah.
And who else did I had? And then of course you go back to other one-hit wonders like Men with Hats and
Men Without Hats.
Men Without Hats. That's what I said. That's what I meant to say. The Romantics, Talking in Your Sleep, Kaja Gugu, Too Shy. Till Tuesday.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And Squeeze, which, a lot of us know Tempted as a one-hit wonder. Again, Squeeze is almost more of a classic rock band.
Yeah.
But Squeeze had a lot of hits, and they were very popular in Britain, but not in America as much. 10 Buck 3, you know them, Jason.
Oh gosh.
Future So Bright You Gotta Wear Shades.
Yeah.
Wall of Voodoo, Mexican Radio.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was a hilarious song when I was little. Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls. Orchestral maneuvers in the dark.
Orchestral
maneuvers in the dark.
Otherwise known as OMD. If you leave. Yeah.
Pretty in Pink, another Pretty in Pink song.
Well, yeah, John Hughes did a good job of promoting all these progressive and new wave bands too with his movies.
That
So,
might be one of the best soundtracks of the 80s.
Don't You Forget About Me was supposed to be whose song originally? Billy Idol.
Okay.
Instead, they bought it and then the rest is history.
Yeah, and there were so many. The 80s I would say there was more diversity in the 80s than there is today for sure in music. Like,
Oh yeah,
just looking at my thing here, you got the Stray Cats with the Stray Cat Strut. I mean, you
yeah,
had a
which is
swing band,
clearly swing. Yeah, it was clearly swing, kind of
rockabilly
rockabilly
almost,
swing. You can definitely swing dance to it. I mean, come on.
almost a throwback to rockabilly.
I mean, it was, and he's still great today.
But it still had an 80s kind of feel to it.
Yeah, I mean, it still encapsulates the 80s. I mean, rock this town. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny though. Like Peter Gabriel, I knew him of the 80s. Like I have Steam on here and Sledgehammer, but
Yep.
I would have never known back then that he was like the front man of Genesis and had like a whole 10-year history prior to him going, getting his solo hits. Obviously the Police are in a lot of people's hits, and I have a lot of Police in here. And I have a little bit of REM as well, especially big fan of their first couple of albums. Tommy Two Tone. Let's see if anybody knows who that is.
It's a famous number.
Yeah. But what does Scandal sing, Jason? I have that in here. The Warrior.
Oh, gosh, gee.
Bang,
Thank
bang.
you.
I am the Warrior. Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine. Again, that song is like a song from the 60s.
Yeah, it could have easily been recorded in the 60s. Maybe a little different sound because it would have been back then, but it would have been a hit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Thomas Dolby, which is
science.
He's got if you dig more into his music, he's got some other really cool stuff too. The Eurythmics, Kajagoogoo, I already mentioned. I think I had this on there twice. And the Tubes, She's a Beauty.
Oh wow, yeah, which is to me kind of a classic kind of rock song. It almost bleeds into corporate rock in a way. Kind of like the Boston ilk. But yeah.
Well, I tell you what I've done is I have a playlist that I created on YouTube, and on that one, I've probably got 500 songs on that thing. And a lot of it I've taken through listening to Steve Craig's show on 99X and just go in there and I'll add them. I didn't know that person sang that song. And that's so.
There's a big artist to me that, I mean, just composition wise is 80s to me. And that's Howard Jones.
Good point. Yeah.
Howard Jones. I mean, the man surrounded himself with keyboards and was just brilliant. Still is brilliant, honestly.
Funny you should mention him. If you go to Daryl Hall's YouTube page, his latest episode of his show, he's a guest.
Oh, nice. Nice. That would be good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You just think about, obviously, the use of the synthesizer was very, very much an 80s thing.
Oh, yeah. Thomas Dolby.
Yeah. And Depeche Mode for that matter. In fact, I went and saw Depeche Mode tribute band. It blew me away because I'm like, oh yeah, they were all synthesizer. I forgot. That's just weird to see. 3 guys up there with synthesizers. Like,
yeah. Did you know that Men at Work is coming back? They've reunited. They're coming back to Atlanta.
Really, Colin Hay got back together with everybody. Man.
I think. I saw them. Looked on their webpage.
I saw him at Amherst Bank Amphitheater doing a acoustic set before a couple other bands with it was Violent Femmes and there's Colin Hay, Violent Femmes, and Bare Naked Ladies of all people.
They must be doing like a brief one because they're coming to Peachtree City for some reason this October, I think.
Peachtree City, wow.
Yeah, of all places.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was just kind of a picture of some of my favorite.
Dipping our toes in the water that is.
I mean, I think that you would probably concur with me some of your favorites as well from the 80s. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I tend to lean on those, and those are to me the ones with the most staying power musically are some of the new wave and progressive stuff. It's your,
Yeah. Second
I
British
mean,
invasion, right?
yeah, I mean, and honestly, thanks to MTV,
Hmm.
and obviously to me, I think it's more of a more musically complex than the first one, first British invasion, but
Well,
um,
they were dealing with a lot of new technology then too, right?
yeah, all at once.
Hmm.
I mean, heck, for that matter, people hadn't recorded on anything digitally until '84. So,
Mm.
when the first CD was released.
It's funny though, like I think that I mean there's a lot of good stuff in the late 80s, like say 88 to bleeding into like 1990, right before
Yeah.
the alt the alt alternative rock scene hit.
Yeah.
Um but that to me that early 80s to mid 80s time period, British leaning toward the British rock. I mean there's a lot of great American new wave
Yeah.
bands too. But that's some of my favorite music I think of all time.
Yeah. I agree. I
Um
agree with you.
Like especially like
Timeless.
I didn't mention a few others. Like for instance, Echo and the Bunnymen is one of my
Oh
favorites
yeah. Who
from
everybody
the 80s.
always like misidentifies as the Cure, but they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, Lips Like Sugar, Killing Moon. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Bring Dancing Horses. Bring on the Dancing Horses. Another John Hughes one.
And I
Um.
didn't mention either the Church
Oh yeah. Under the Milky Way.
or the Smiths. I mean, there's three bands right there that were.
Stop
I
me.
don't think they
Stop
landed in.
me.
Huh?
Gene, stop me if you've heard this one before. Okay.
What's that?
You don't get the joke.
This is the song. You got you. That's some interesting
Anyway.
names for songs.
Yes, I know.
uh, which oddly enough, I'm
Gene,
not
take
as
a
big
bow.
of a.
Gene,
I'm
take a bow.
huh?
Take a bow. No, sorry. Gene,
We are
take a
getting
bow.
some layback. I'm honestly not as big of a fan of Morrissey's solo stuff as I am with the Smiths. So it's
No.
weird. Of course, Johnny Marr is a huge reason Smiths were really great, but
Yeah.
their lead guitarist. Well, Jason, I think we're going to hit it. I think we'll call that a day.
Call it a day, sir.
We're a little bit shorter today, but that's all right. I think we had. I think all in all, we did good. Everybody, we did good. Everybody.
Everybody, all right, yeah. We'll tell our studio audience to,
Shut her down.
Stick around. There's some consolation prizes just for being here.
Oh man. All right. Well, Jason, I appreciate it, man.
Yep.
And as always, another great show. Top notch. Top notch.
Good talk, Gene. Good talk.
All right. Take care, everybody, and we will see you next time.